Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. If you have a comment, email it to me. Box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives and check us out on Instagram. Instagram.com/greatdetectives. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. And I also want to encourage you to check out my wife's business, Ashira Clips. You just go to lilarose.com/Ashira. That's lilarosenow.com/ASHIRA. And there you can find a wide variety of hairpins, headbands, and hair clips to suit a wide variety of different tastes and styles. That's lilarose.com/Ashira. Well, now it is time for this week's episode of Mr. Chameleon, the original air date, June 22nd, 1949, and this one is The Bizarre Motive Murder Case.
Next, Mr. Chameleon and the Bizarre Motive Murder Case. Tonight we again present the famous Mr. Chameleon of Central Headquarters in his most famous cases of crime and murder. Brought to you by the makers of genuine Bayer aspirin. Mr. Chameleon, as you all know, is the famous and dreaded detective of Central Police Headquarters who frequently uses a disguise or impersonation to confuse the criminals he is tracking down. In tonight's case, he appears in a particularly interesting disguise which the audience will at all times recognize. Tonight we give you Mr. Chameleon in The Bizarre Motive Murder Case. Among the immortals of music is Maurice Montaigne, one of the greatest concert pianists of his time. Not only a fine musician, but a romantic figure of a man whose dark, good looks have stirred many a feminine heart. And now, before a packed house, he is finishing a concert. And as he plays the final bars of a classical number, he suddenly goes from that into the wedding march.
Thank you, my dear friends. Thank you all very much. But now, please, may I have silence? I have something to say to you. I see you understand the meaning of that wedding march, that you've read in the papers that at last Maurice Montaigne is about to be married. And it's true, my friends. I am deeply moved by this token of affection from all of you in the audience whom I consider my very dear friends. I only wish I could invite every one of you to my wedding. But since Cora and I are to be married very quietly, that is out of the question. And so I will do the next best thing. I will introduce you to my charming fiancée, Miss Cora Blackwell. She is sitting among you in the 7th row, but she will come up here on the stage. Come, Cora, come. Cora, what's wrong? Why don't you answer me? Cora, are you ill? Darling, are you ill?
No, Mr. Montaigne. She's not ill. She's dead.
And now, a little later, Mr. Chameleon, the great detective, is in the concert hall, examining the dead body of Cora Blackwell and regarding with deep interest a box of candy which the dead girl had dropped on the floor. And he says to Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold,
Girl was poisoned, Dave. She died very quickly. And from the general appearance, I'd say offhand that a certain deadly poison from India was used.
Was it put into the candy, Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, apparently. Let me break this piece and smell it. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is a rare poison from India. Mr. Montaigne?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon. Oh, my poor Cora. My beautiful Cora. Was she really murdered?
Yes, Mr. Montaigne. This candy is poisoned. Where did she get it?
Why, it looks like the candy they sell here in the lobby of the concert hall.
Did Cora Blackwell have it with her when you last saw her?
No, she must have bought it on her way into the hall. Oh, Cora, my beloved. We would be married tomorrow.
Mr. Montaigne, you are a great romantic figure as well as a great musician.
Mr. Chameleon,
well, it's quite true. Your engagement to Miss Blackwell made the headlines. Now, how long have you known Miss Blackwell?
Why, not very long.
I asked you how long.
Only a few weeks. It was love at first sight.
Well, how did you meet her? Mr. Montaigne, how did you meet her?
All right, Mr. Chameleon, I'll tell you. I want you to know. Did you ever hear of my manager, Sidney Dorwick?
Well, he's almost as famous as you are, Mr. Montaigne. Was Miss Blackwell a friend of his?
Cora was engaged to Sidney.
Engaged to him?
Yes. But as soon as she met me, she knew it was all wrong. Cora and I were meant for each other. I was the one she loved.
And how did Sidney Dorwick react to that?
He acted very badly. He's hardly spoken to me since. He was insanely jealous of Cora, insanely possessive.
Where is he now?
In my dressing room, right over there. But, Mr. Chameleon, you don't suspect this.
I suspect no one. As yet, Mr. Montaigne. Right now, my job is to collect facts as quickly as possible. Mr. Sidney Dorwick?
Yes.
I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters. I understand Miss Cora Blackwell had been engaged to marry you before she became engaged to Maurice Montaigne.
So Maurice told you, did he? I might have known he would. Yes, Cora was once engaged to me. I never stopped loving her.
Are you familiar with that line of poetry, Mr. Dorwick? Each man kills the thing he loves.
Are you implying I killed Cora?
Where were you during the concert?
Now, look here, Mr. Chameleon.
Where were you, not only during the concert, but just before it started? And did you see Cora Blackwell?
No, I did not.
You've answered only half my question. Where were you during the concert?
Backstage. And now I'll tell you something, Mr. Chameleon.
But I insist on seeing Mr. Chameleon. I insist on seeing him. Who are you to keep me out?
Detective Sergeant Arnold. I'm sorry, madam. Mr. Chameleon is busy right now.
Very well, young man. But I'll be back. Never fear. I am Maria Pridwell.
Dave?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon?
Who was that who wanted to see me?
Oh, some old gal who sounded wacky to me. You should see her. All trailing scarves and strings of beads.
Oh, really? Well, thanks for keeping it out. Wait a minute, Dave. I want to ask Dorwick something. Mr. Dorwick, Maurice Montaigne is a very famous pianist. Does he get much fan mail?
Oh, tons of it, all from addle-headed females. My office upstairs in the concert hall here is full of it, Mr. Chameleon.
Dave, I want all of that fan mail confiscated. Tell Detective Foley.
Yes, Mr. Chameleon.
Now you're on the right track, Mr. Chameleon.
Is that so? You mean because I'm not just concentrating on you, Mr. Dorwick?
Mr. Chameleon, I started to tell you something.
What was it?
2 women besides Cora expected to marry Maurice Montaigne.
Were they here at his concert tonight?
Yes.
Who are they?
One is Vera Shefton, who had already told all her friends that Maurice was going to marry her. The other is Swan Johnson, who had actually left her husband because of Maurice.
I see. Dave?
Yes, sir.
I gave orders that everyone who was sitting near Cora Blackwell be kept here in the concert hall. You go and see if Vera Shefton and Swan Johnson were among them.
Well, they're right here, Mr. Chameleon. Foley's been getting all the names.
Oh, good. You come in, ladies. I'm Chameleon of Central Police Headquarters. You're Miss Vera Shefton, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
And you're Mrs. Johnson.
How did you know that, Mr. Chameleon?
I noticed that you were wearing a wedding ring, Mrs. Johnson, even though you left your husband for Maurice Montaigne.
Who told you that?
Is it true, Mrs. Johnson?
Yes, but I care nothing for Maurice anymore. My husband Alfred and I are reconciled. He was here with me at the concert tonight.
How about you, Miss Shefton? Do you care nothing for Maurice Montaigne, the great pianist?
I care so little for him, Mr. Chameleon, that I've had nothing to do with him. I haven't even wanted to see the man or speak to him.
Well, then you mustn't get so excited about him, Miss Shefton.
Well, I'm not excited, but I've had nothing to do with Maurice, and you...
Mr. Chameleon.
Yes?
You are Mr. Chameleon, aren't you? Well, I am Maria Pridwell, and I tried to get in before, but that sentry of yours stopped me.
Yes, Miss Pridwell. I'm sorry, but I'm very busy now.
Too busy to talk to me? That's very foolish of you, Mr. Chameleon. You see, I'm a lover of great music. I've long worshipped at the shrine of Maurice Montaigne. I've never met him, but to me,
Miss Pridwell,
he's everything divine. And to think that lovely girl sitting next to me was his fiancée.
You were sitting next to Cora Blackwell at the concert?
I was. And after they removed her body, Mr. Chameleon, I found this note beneath her seat. A note written on a program. Here.
Miss Pridwell, you should have given this to Detective Sergeant Arnold.
The sentry? No, Mr. Chameleon. I don't deal with underlings.
Well, let's see what the note says. Do hope you and Maurice will join me for supper after the concert. Signed, Vera. Miss Shefton, did you give this note to Cora Blackwell, the murdered girl?
Yes, Mr. Chameleon.
I thought you said you wouldn't go near Maurice Montaigne.
Doesn't that note prove I had no ill feelings?
It also proves that you stopped at Cora Blackwell's seat just before she was murdered. But you could have given her the poison candy.
No, I
Mr. Chameleon, look at this. Look what we found.
What is it, Dave?
A second box of candy. And it has Cora Blackwell's fingerprints on it.
Where'd you find it?
In row G, not far from Cora Blackwell's seat.
Here, let me smell a piece of that candy. No poison in these. Dave, I have a hunch that this was the box that Cora Blackwell herself purchased. The other box of poison candy was substituted for it.
Well, don't look at me, Mr. Chameleon.
Someone did it, Miss Shefton. And where are you going, Mrs. Johnson?
My husband is waiting for me.
Well, he'll have to wait, Mrs. Johnson. Where were you sitting during the concert?
Were you speaking to me?
I certainly was. What row were you sitting in, Mrs. Johnson?
Row G. But I know nothing about that box of candy. I can't imagine how it got there.
It didn't walk there, Mrs. Johnson. All right, both you and Miss Shefton may go. But don't try to leave town. I may want to question you again, soon.
Very well, Mr. Chameleon.
Do you think she did it, Mr. Chameleon?
Either one of them could have done it, Dave.
We're beginning to make progress, aren't we, Mr. Chameleon?
What? Oh, Miss Pridwell. Yes, we certainly are.
What does she mean, we? And how did she get in here?
Young man, I'll have you know I'm helping, Mr. Chameleon. As a lover of fine music and an admirer of Maurice Montaigne's, I consider it my duty to find his fiancée's murderer.
Now, the next morning at Central Police Headquarters, Mr. Chameleon and Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold are carefully going over the famous pianist Maurice Montaigne's fan mail when the telephone rings, and Mr. Chameleon exclaims,
Good heavens, Dave. You suppose that's Maria Pridwell again?
Oh, I told you not to encourage that dame. She's a nut.
Well, sometimes nuts can be very helpful in a murder case, Dave. I'll take it. Hello. Oh, yes, Miss Pridwell. What was that? Are you sure? I see. Thank you very much. Yes, Miss Pridwell, any time. Goodbye.
Now what?
Don't sound so scornful, Dave. Maria Pridwell just gave me an interesting piece of information. One I intend to spring on Sidney Dorwick, Montaigne's manager, as soon as he and the great pianist Maurice Montaigne get here. Oh, and here they are, I imagine. You come in, gentlemen. Mr. Dorwick, Mr. Montaigne. You're right on time.
Sidney never keeps the police waiting.
Why, what sort of a dirty crack is that, Maurice?
Please, gentlemen, no quarreling.
Well,
I sent for you both because I wanted to ask you about some of these letters.
Ah, my fan mail.
Not all of them, Mr. Montaigne. 2 of these letters actually threaten you. I have here 2 notes dated a week ago, one from Vera Shefton, one from Swan Johnson, both saying, in effect, you will marry me or else.
Oh, Mr. Chameleon, do you think I let their stupid threats bother me?
They were also threatening Cora Blackwell, the woman you loved and who was murdered. And then, too, here is a series of letters, Mr. Montaigne, at least a dozen of them, all signed by a single name, Cassandra.
Oh, those.
Just what do they mean, Montaigne? These letters from Cassandra speak of your dream house and your 3 dream children.
Dream children is right. I've never seen this Cassandra. Sidney here has tried in vain to find out who she is.
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, I can't find out who wrote those letters to Maurice.
Well, obviously, the woman is mentally ill if she imagines that she's married to you, Mr. Montaigne.
What of it? She sent me fabulously expensive gifts, and her letters make me laugh. So let her keep on writing them.
And that's just like you, Maurice, you rotten so-and-so.
Sidney!
You've always used women, even this poor Cassandra. Cora Blackwell's better off dead than married to you. And I'd like to kill you, too, Mr. Chameleon. Help!
Let go of him, Dorwick.
I said let go!
I'm sorry I had to use jiu-jitsu. Could hardly let you murder Mr. Montaigne in my office, Dorwick. And what did you mean you could kill him, too?
Well, I didn't mean that I killed Cora. I love Cora.
Dorwick, you told me that you were backstage all during the concert. Well, a Miss Maria Pridwell just phoned to tell me that she saw you in the auditorium and speaking to Cora Blackwell. Is that true? Answer me and don't lie again.
All right, Mr. Chameleon, it's true. I was afraid to tell you, but you can't pin Cora's murder on me.
I'm not trying to pin her murder on anyone. The innocent must be protected. The guilty must be punished. That is my motto. You were speaking to Cora Blackwell just before she died of poison. And if you are guilty, Dorwick, you will be punished.
Mr. Chameleon and the bizarre motive murder case continues in just a moment. A very important thing to know about genuine Bayer aspirin is that its single active ingredient is so gentle to the system, mothers give it even to small children on their doctor's advice. Always remember this because it means that when you have an ordinary headache, neuritic, or neuralgic pain, you can take Bayer aspirin with complete confidence. For Bayer aspirin gives you more than fast relief, it also gives you the dependable relief that's important to your health. Bayer aspirin's speed is proved by the fact that it's actually ready to go to work in 2 seconds, and its dependability is proved by its record of use by millions of normal people without ill effect, a record no other pain reliever can match. So don't experiment when you're in pain. Don't risk using drugs that have not stood the test of time. Instead, use something that millions know from experience is fast and completely dependable, too, genuine Bayer aspirin. When you buy, ask for it by its full name, Bayer aspirin, not just for aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. And now back to Mr. Chameleon and the bizarre motive murder case. The murder of Cora Blackwell, the fiancée of the famous pianist Maurice Montaigne, could be laid at the door of not one but several suspects who were present in the concert hall when she died. And we find Mr. Chameleon in the old-fashioned apartment of Maria Pridwell, a lover of great music. And Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold is saying to him disgustedly,
For Pete's sake, Mr. Chameleon, don't we have better things to do than waste time with an old eccentric like Miss Pridwell?
Well, don't forget, Dave, she gave us that tip about Sidney Dorwick. I have a real reason for coming here. She may be a great help.
What a place this apartment of hers is.
It's old-fashioned but expensive, Dave. And everywhere pictures of musicians and composers.
I don't go for this long-hair music. The 12th Street rag is good enough for me.
I see.
I think I'll look around a bit.
Yes, go ahead, Dave. I agree. It's like a museum. Oh, here comes Miss Pridwell. Good evening, Miss Pridwell.
Mr. Chameleon, how nice of you to come to my little nest. My retreat from an ugly and stupid world. But then great music is a perfect escape from such a world. Don't you agree?
I certainly do, Miss Pridwell. Incidentally, you have pictures of all the famous musicians except Felix Hayden.
And who is Felix Hayden?
Oh, he's a great pianist, Viennese, and a friend of Maurice Montaigne. He's been making my life miserable.
How, Mr. Chameleon?
By calling me constantly and berating the police because they're so slow in finding Cora Blackwell's murderer. You may hear from him, too.
You told him about me, Mr. Chameleon?
Yes, I did, Miss Pridwell. I said that you had given me invaluable aid in the case, and he snorted and said that anyone was better than the police, and then he asked for your name. Good heavens. Is that the 12th Street rag I'm hearing?
Yes. Who's playing it? That hideous music that I loathe. Who put that record on?
Detective Sergeant Dave Arnold, I suspect.
What are you doing in here, young man? Turn that thing off. I loathe that sort of music. I won't have it played in my home.
Sorry, Miss Pridwell. Just happened to find this pile of records. Look, Mr. Chameleon, All my favorite jazz pieces.
Miss Pridwell, I am surprised. I thought you liked only classical music.
You don't suppose those dreadful jazz records are mine? I sublet this apartment to a young couple last year. They later went to South America and left these records behind. Horrible stuff, degrading. I don't see how anyone... Oh, excuse me, there's the doorbell.
Dave, let me see those records.
Look at them, but don't play them, Mr. Chameleon. It sets my teeth on edge. Awful, simply awful. Yes?
Miss Maria Pridwell?
Yes?
I'm Sidney Dorwick, Maurice Montaigne's manager. I understand you've been making trouble for me, and I've come to warn you.
Mr.
You
Dorwick.
can't push me into the electric chair. From now on, you keep your mouth shut, or else...
Yes, Mr. Dorwick. Oh, dear, what am I going to do?
Miss Pridwell, who was that? Who was it?
Mr. Chameleon, I was wrong to tell you about Mr. Dorwick. I'm sure it was that girl, Vera Shefton, who really killed Miss Blackwell.
Dave, you try and catch whoever was at the door.
Okay, Mr. Chameleon.
Was that Sidney Dorwick at your door, Miss Pridwell?
No, and I'm certain that Vera Shefton, that she's the one you want.
Miss Pridwell, you're lying. That was Sidney Dorwick at your door, wasn't it? And he threatened you.
I can't tell you.
He got away, Mr. Chameleon. Was a man, all right. Just caught a glimpse of him driving off in a car.
Did it look like Sidney Dorwick, Dave?
I couldn't tell.
Okay, Dave. Call headquarters and get the commissioner of police on the phone, please.
Yes, sir.
Miss Pridwell, you have got to tell me the truth. Now, was that Sidney Dorwick?
I can't tell you. I'm too afraid.
Hold on a minute, will you?
Yeah.
Here's the commissioner, Mr. Chameleon.
Oh, thanks. Hello, Commissioner.
Yes, what's up, Chameleon?
Plenty, Commissioner. I'm at Miss Maria Pridwell's apartment, and a man just came to the door and threatened her.
Yes?
And she's too frightened to admit it, but I'm sure that it was Sidney Dorwick, Maurice Montaigne's manager. He got away, unfortunately. Will you have someone shadow him?
All right, I'll put a man on his trail immediately. Too bad we can't hold him.
Well, we haven't enough evidence against him, Commissioner. That's the trouble. He could be guilty, but so could Vera or Swan Johnson, those women who were in love with Montaigne. Any one of them could have killed Cora Blackwell.
Yes, but only one of them is the murderer, Chameleon.
How right you are. Okay, Commissioner, I'll see you later. As for you, Miss Pridwell, don't be afraid. I'll have a policeman watching this building, too.
Thank you, Mr. Chameleon. You're so efficient.
Well, that's more than Felix Hayden thinks I am. Goodbye, Miss Pridwell.
Goodbye. And call on me again, Mr. Chameleon.
I shall, Miss Pridwell. I shall indeed. Come along, Dave.
Say, Mr. Chameleon, who is this Hayden guy who doesn't think you're efficient?
Felix Hayden, a Viennese concert pianist, Dave. A character I invented.
You invented?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I get it. You mean you're going to disguise yourself as this Felix Hayden?
That's it, Dave. And as Felix Hayden, I'm going to call on the music-loving Miss Pridwell. I shall win her confidence. I'll suggest that I give a musicale in her apartment and invite all the suspects, including the great Maurice Montaigne. Perhaps when they're all together, Dave, we may trap the killer of Cora Blackwell.
And now, a week later, we find Mr. Chameleon approaching Maria Pridwell's apartment in the disguise of Felix Hayden, a concert pianist. He is saying to Dave Arnold,
All right, Dave, wait here in the hall. And don't let Maria Pridwell see you, but I'll leave the door open a crack so that you can step in later.
You think they're all here, Mr. Chameleon?
Oh, I'm sure they are, Dave. Don't forget, in my disguise as Felix Hayden, I've become fast friends with Maria Pridwell. We planned this musicale together. Here we are. Auf Wiedersehen, Dave. From this moment on, I am Felix Hayden.
Mr. Hayden, I thought it must be you. Come in.
My dear Miss Pridwell, I kiss your hand.
Oh.
I am thrilled to be here.
And I'm thrilled to have you and Maurice Montaigne.
Are the others here, too?
All of them, Mr. Hayden.
Yeah.
Swan Johnson, Sidney Dorwick, Vera Shefton, who's making a fool of herself over Mr. Montaigne.
I am not surprised. I learned something interesting today. Vera Shefton is planning on marrying poor Maurice as soon as he is recovered from the shock of Cora Blackwell's murder.
But Maurice wouldn't marry Miss Shefton.
Miss Pridwell, men are weak. She will get him eventually. But let us go in.
Yes, Yes, of course.
Enjoy.
Friends, may I present Mr. Felix Hayden, Miss Shefton, Mrs.
do,
Johnson,
How do you
and,
do?
you know, Sidney Dorwick?
No, he doesn't. And I don't know Felix Hayden. I never heard of a pianist named Felix Hayden.
Mr. Dorwick.
Yes, and I don't believe he's a friend of Maurice's. When did you meet Maurice?
Only recently, but we are friends. I am a great admirer of Maurice. He is such a great pianist.
That's right, Sidney. Felix admires me greatly.
Though not as much as his friend Cassandra does.
What was that about Cassandra?
You know, Sidney, that crazy woman has been writing me those letters.
Crazy woman?
Yes, Miss Bridwell. Maurice read me her letters.
Oh, we laughed our heads off, didn't we, Felix?
Yes, right.
Laughed? You laughed at Cassandra, Mr. Montaigne? When she was the only true love you ever had?
Miss Pritt.
These other fools, Cora Blackwell and Vera Shefton here, they're nothing. But Cassandra was your spiritual wife, the mother of your children.
Wait, Miss Bridwell, how did you know about these letters? Who told you their contents?
Why, Mr. Montaigne himself did.
That's a lie, Miss Pridwell. I never met you until the time of Cora's death, and certainly I never mentioned Cassandra's letters to you.
Well, perhaps Miss Bridwell is psychic. Maurice, what sort of woman would you say this Cassandra was?
An old fool, obviously, who's built herself a dream world.
Stop it! It's not a dream world. Cassandra's your wife. She's the mother of your children. Stop denying it or I'll kill you. I'll kill you.
Oh, no, you won't, Miss Bridwell. You won't kill anyone again. You are Cassandra, aren't you, Miss Bridwell?
Yes, I'm Cassandra, the only woman who really loved Maurice wholeheartedly and purely. I wrote to him. I sent him gifts. I had his children.
Children you only imagined, Miss Bridwell. It's all part of your distorted dream world. I first suspected you the day I discovered those jazz records. They were yours, I was sure of that. Some of them were recent releases.
But I hate that kind of music.
That is the only kind of music you really like. There was no young couple, I checked. You never sublet the apartment. You only pretended to be a music lover because of your infatuation with the romantic figure of Maurice Montaigne.
No.
When you read of his engagement to young Cora Blackwell, in your poor, sick mind, you thought of her as a rival. So you poisoned her at the concert.
No!
You used the very poison which is in this coffee cup. The cup which you set down before Vera Shefton. You intended to kill her, too.
Give me that cup.
Not till its contents are analyzed, Dave.
Yes, Mr. Chameleon, I'm here. I'll hold her.
Now, please.
That's enough now.
Now, don't struggle, Miss Bridwell. It's all over now. You are the murderer of Cora Blackwell.
Yes. Yes, I am. And you're Mr. Chameleon, not Felix Hayden. But Maurice Montaigne.
He knew about the disguise. I planted him here. I told him what to say. Miss Bridwell, you're a sick woman. From now on, you'll be taken care of by doctors and psychiatrists. And that's best for everyone, including yourself.
And with these words, Mr. Chameleon concludes tonight's murder case. When you seek fast relief from an ordinary headache, neuritic, or neuralgic pain, use quick-acting Bayer aspirin. As you can see for yourself, by dropping a Bayer aspirin tablet in a glass of water, it starts to disintegrate in 2 seconds. It does the same in your stomach. And because of this amazing 2-second disintegrating action, Bayer aspirin tablets are ready to go to work almost instantly you take them to bring you really fast relief from pain. And remember, besides quick relief, Bayer aspirin also means reliable relief. No other pain reliever can match Bayer aspirin's record of use by millions of normal people without ill effect. So when you buy, always ask for it by its full name, Bayer aspirin, never by the name aspirin alone. Get the 100-tablet bottle and you get Bayer aspirin tablets for less than a penny apiece. Listen next Wednesday night at this same time for Mr. Chameleon, the man of many faces, in The Case of the Conceited Murderer. Mr. Chameleon is played by Karl Swenson and written by Marie Baumer from the original story by Frank and Ann Hummert. Music directed by Victor Arden. Your announcer is Howard Claney.
You probably have heard or read about the remarkable discovery that actually cuts down tooth decay, ammoniated tooth powder. Today, Dr. Lyons, America's favorite tooth powder, is available in this ammoniated form. Based on a formula developed by University of Illinois scientists, it destroys bacteria Lactobacillus acidophilus, which cause cavities. Thus, it not only cuts down tooth decay, but pain, worry, and expense as well. So, to reduce tooth decay, to have sounder, healthier, handsomer teeth, use ammoniated Dr. Lyons tooth powder. Both regular Dr. Lyons tooth powder and new ammoniated Dr. Lyons are at all drug and toilet goods counters.
Listen for Mr. Chameleon in The Case of the Conceited Murderer next Wednesday night at this time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Welcome back. This was really good. Miss Pridwell is a fantastic character, and the rare killer Mr. Chameleon has compassion for. I loved her rivalry with Dave, calling him the Century and saying she doesn't deal with underlings. And his loathing for her is equally fun. I think that the most unnecessary bit of narration in this episode may have been the part saying Dave was saying something disdainful about Mrs. Pridwell, because of course he was. And I think it was probably their mutual loathing that led Dave to looking at her records for something to play to annoy her, which led to her revelation as not only a killer, but a jazz fan. The 12th Street Rag was actually written back in 1915, so Dave Arnold loved a 34-year-old composition, which makes me relate to him so much. I also found out that the 12th Street Rag was the basic for music in SpongeBob SquarePants and the Chuck E. Cheese movie. The cultural benefits of a composition being in the public domain. And now we turn to listener comments and feedback, and we have an email from Kim, who writes, "When I get behind on listening to the podcast, I catch up by listening to all of one show at a time. And I have recently been catching up with Mr. Chameleon. I must say I find this show unexpectedly delightful. Yes, it is, as others have said, corny, but I find it entirely enjoyable in its corniness, and I love the tropes. 1. How in nearly episode, just like in Mr. Keen, someone cries out, 'Mr. Chameleon, the famous detective.' I would add that we do have a t-shirt on that trope. Over at t-shirt.greatdetectives.net. But Kim continues, the trademark Hummert habit of constantly identifying characters by their full names, and if not, then saying something, go into the kitchen and get your sister Agnes, to which the only normal response would be, I know Agnes is my sister, what is wrong with you? If it were a drinking game, everyone would be sauced before getting halfway through an episode. With every disguise, it's not just, I'll be in disguise as a plumber, but more specifically, I'll be in disguise as a plumber named Mordecai Jacques O'Grady III. Thanks for that one, Kim. I actually cracked up the first time I recorded. I was going to leave it in, but the way it worked with the mic, it ended up messing up the whole take. I will say that I actually really liked that as just a general approach, because having an idea of who this character is and not just having it as like a thin fabrication, I think makes the disguise come off as a bit more believable. 4, the way he is constantly interviewing people at midnight or later and nobody ever says, why are you here? We were asleep. This is a show full of night owls. 5, how he is constantly announcing to the suspects that they are going to be watched by the police. This is a direct quote. And while the suspects were in the room with him, Detective Sergeant Arnold had these two people tailed and under police surveillance every single minute. Is that not supposed to be a secret? Good point, Kim. Now, there was such a thing as an open tail where you would tail suspects and they would know that they were being tailed, no real effort to hide it. There's an example of that in the 1954 Dragnet movie, and it's kind of an intimidating thing where they are trying to unnerve and borderline harass the suspect. But I don't really think that that's what Mr. Chameleon is doing, so it is weird that he does it. In a recent episode, the case was described as being one of the toughest unsolved cases he's ever faced. And if you do the math, the murder only occurred a couple hours before. I'm pretty sure most murders are unsolved after only a couple of hours. And 7, another recent episode had the wonderfully florid title of Murder in the House of Torture, which was particularly funny to hear the peppy theme tune after the announcement of that title. So yes, the show is entirely silly, and I always look forward to hearing what you say afterwards, gently teasing the show for its silliness, but I find it to be a charming, comforting show about murder, and I'm glad that there are so many more episodes to come. Well, thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate your email and the great way you summarize the series. Then over on Instagram, we have a comment regarding the episode, The Organ Grinder Murder Case. Brains Benton wrote, "What a gloriously over-the-top episode. Slightly disappointed that Chameleon did not disguise himself as an organ grinder, but you can't have it all." Well, I would not be surprised if before the series is done that we don't have a scene where Mr. Chameleon is disguised as an organ grinder. An organ grinder named Mordecai Jock O'Grady III. But it just won't be an episode that's about an organ grinder. And then finally we go over to YouTube where Saysoft writes, regarding the case of the murdered gold digger, well, there is one good thing about this week's episode. Unlike what we saw last week, Mr. Chameleon didn't use his disguise in a way that would get the case thrown out of court. Well, thanks so much, Saysoft, and now it's time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day. And I want to thank our Patreon supporter of the day, Frank. Frank's been one of our Patreon supporters since January of 2021, currently supporting the podcast at the rookie level of $2 or more per month. Thank you so much for your support, Frank. And that will do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow us using your favorite podcast software. And if you're enjoying the podcast on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and mark the notification bell. We will be back next Thursday with another episode of Mr. Chameleon. Coming next Tuesday, we'll be bringing you Squad Room. But join us back here tomorrow for yours truly, Johnny Dollar, where...
Put it this way. I never met the young lady. Fred married her one night in Elko, Nevada. 2 days later, they were on their way to Malaya. 6 months there, and the development station was raided by guerrillas one night. And I suddenly no longer have a son. Have you eaten your dinner, Mr. Dollar?
Oh, I wouldn't want to trouble you.
Hardy, set a place for Mr. Dollar.
Very good, sir.
Well?
Well, I thought she might phone me when she got back to the States. She never did. Never a letter, nothing. I'm old and sick, but I still want to see the girl my son married. It's not an easy thing to lose a son, Mr. Dollar. And I lost a good one. I lost the best son a man ever had.
I'm sure you did, sir.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to Box13 at greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives. And check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/Great Detectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.